Hello and welcome to the I Want to Know podcast. I'm Josh Spector and I am your host. If you don't know who I am, I'm the creator of the For the Interested newsletter, which you can check out at fortheinterested.com. If you're new here, this podcast exists for a simple reason: to help creative entrepreneurs get their questions answered. Here's how it works. In each episode, a different guest comes on and asks me 3 questions. We have about a 10-minute conversation about each of them, and that's it. No fluff, hopefully lots of helpful tips and strategies that not only the guest can use, but you can use as a listener or viewer. Speaking of guests, today's guest is Stephanie Fuccio. Stephanie is obsessed with podcasting. She's been a creator for 6 years, has been editing podcasts for clients for 3 years, and loves helping to shape stories. She's passionate about connecting people, so she writes 2 newsletters. One for fellow podcast editors and the other for solopreneurs from a podcast editor's perspective, in hopes of connecting the 2 groups to each other. So with that in mind, we are going to talk a lot today about balancing those multiple skills and messaging and community. And yes, it will be podcast related, but I think much broader than that. So, hey, Stephanie, welcome to the show, joining us all the way from Romania.
Hi, Josh. Hi, everybody that's listening. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm pretty sure you are my first guest from Romania. So congratulations on that. Your prize is in the mail. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about what is the first thing that you want to know.
Yeah, you described it kindly, but I would describe it more as my creative mess. Like, how do I build a creative business when I'm learning and growing new skills all the time? I'm constantly upskilling and experimenting, but it's sometimes hard to convince folks that I can do the new thing once I get enough experience with it. Just how do you sell and learn at the same time?
Sure. So let's start here. So tell me a little bit about what your business is now and maybe where you're hoping to head with it. And what are the skills you're talking about that you both have now and the skills that you're learning? So give me a little more context.
Sure. Yeah. I primarily do podcast editing now, meaning I clean up and do different things with the audio from mostly business folks' podcasts. However, I've also been doing some video editing over the last year, and I like that. And I have it for my own projects and my own podcast editing community as well. So I've been diving into more of YouTube optimization, different video editing skills, those kinds of things. So anything connected to the post-production or basically after recording part of podcasting, including podcasting as video, I'm getting my hands dirty with and have different levels of skills in all of them. So I'm, doing all of that. And I'm constantly trying out different tools that can do the things better and clients sound better and look better and be found more and all of those things.
So let me ask you a question. Do you feel like, it sounds like from your question that you feel like these things are somewhat at odds with each other, and you even describe it as a creative mess, but they actually seem relatively aligned because for the most part, all your clients are podcasters, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And you're just, and for that matter, I think you said mainly like business podcasts, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's just that the ways you're helping them are expanded, right? So maybe originally it was, I'll just edit your podcast, but now it's, I'll edit it and I'll get you on YouTube. And I'll use this tool or that tool or whatever. Ultimately, it's helping the same people accomplish the same goal, correct?
It is, yeah. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's how do I get them to grow with me? And how do I get them to want to grow with me?
Getting existing. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How do you get your existing clients to utilize additional services you can offer? For example, you have a podcaster who's hiring you to edit their podcast and you're like, hey, you should be on YouTube. We should be doing X, Y, and Z. I can do it for you. And they're saying to you, I don't care about YouTube. Is that sort of a piece of the issue?
Yeah.
Okay. With existing people versus bringing in new people who specifically want YouTube.
Either one would be fine, honestly.
Okay.
I don't care. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing I would say to you is learning more and adding more skills is never a problem. So that's ultimately a good thing. And ideally, you want to create a flywheel where the things you learn, the skills you develop, create new ways for you to help people. The experience you get helping those people leads you to learn and refine those skills, and round it goes. Right. So I think that's the first thing, is to understand that it may feel a little scattered or frustrating, or you're like, you see a podcaster should be on YouTube, but your client doesn't see it or doesn't care. That's different from sort of these things being at conflict with each other. So I think part of it is you understanding in your own messaging and taking a step back. I feel like you're maybe a little focused on the tactics, seeing these as different things. But ultimately, all client relationships and all consulting and all value for that matter is result driven. So people may be hiring you, forget the YouTube and the other stuff. If initially all you did was edit podcasts, in your mind, you might be going, people are hiring me to edit their podcasts. But actually the editing of the podcast is a tactic to accomplish the result they want. They're really hiring you because they want to have a successful podcast. They want it to sound good. They want to save their own time or resources or whatever. So these different tactics that you're offering are still helping them accomplish the same result in bigger and better ways. So part of that conversation is, let's say you have a conversation with an existing client who's paying you to edit their podcast. I think that conversation isn't, hey, I can also do YouTube stuff. You should do YouTube stuff. I think the conversation comes from a result point. You hired me because you want your podcast to be successful. Let's define what successful means. This YouTube thing is going to help you get more listeners. This YouTube thing is going to help you get the result you want. Because where they're bogged down, they have their own preconceived notions about whatever, right? They might be going, I don't care about YouTube. I'm not focused on video. This is an audio podcast, whatever. But they do care about whatever the result is they want. More listeners, more exposure. And I think that's the way that you want to pitch it, as opposed to it's this different thing than what I'm doing for you. It's an extension and a way to get you to increase the likelihood that you get the results that you want. When you extrapolate it, goes into all your messaging from the very beginning, right? So that what you actually do, especially now that there's multiple ways that you can help people, is that you help business podcasts grow their audience, monetize, whatever, fill in the blank of whatever the result is that they want. So that when you have those conversations with new customers and when people are looking at you and going, what does she do? You don't want them to go, oh, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't want them to go, oh, she's just a podcast editor. Because then if you're quote unquote just a podcast editor, you're commodified. There's a million podcast editors.
Right.
So I think what you actually want to do is position yourself as, I'm a person who helps these people get this result. And when they go, how do you do that? You go, there's a bunch of different ways I can do that. A, B, and C, right? Also will help differentiate you, because there's other people that maybe just do podcast editing. Now, part of your messaging, and I'm talking about new clients now and that kind of stuff, but part of your messaging to them, you're actually positioning yourself, I don't want to say against those other people, but you're differentiating yourself, right?
Sure.
So you're going, look, there's a lot of people out there you can hire to edit your podcast. But if you really want this result, you need more than a podcast. You need someone that can edit your podcast and put it on YouTube and do X, Y, and Z and knows how to do these things. I can bring all of that to the table, which ultimately is going to help you get more of what you want.
Yeah. Okay. So focus on the results, not the skills. I definitely have been focusing on the skills. And I think even my pricing page lists more of the details of the skills, not the results that they will get. So yeah, that is a repositioning for sure.
Yeah. The results and the benefits. And I think you want to look at the fact that you can do multiple things as a strength and a differentiation, as opposed to it's potentially confusing. The truth is and again, I'm making some assumptions here. So, you'll obviously have to think this through, but the truth is you probably, when you think about your sort of ideal client at this point, your ideal client is probably not someone that just wants a podcast, right? Your ideal client is someone that is focused on that result and willing to do what it takes to get that. And I think it creates a real opportunity for you to go, look, if you're just someone who wants to hire someone for X amount an hour or whatever to edit your podcast, go ahead. That's not me. I can do that. I'm focused on editing and all this stuff as a means to an end. And it's ultimately what they really want. But they may not, they know the result they want, but they may not necessarily know. The average person that isn't in this space has no idea how important YouTube is to podcasts. So part of what you need to do is but they know they want a bigger audience. They want to be found in search and Google and all that stuff. So part of your job is to help them understand, I'm going to help you get the thing you actually want. You think you just need a podcast editor.
Yeah.
But that's not actually going to get you what you want. And that's where your story also, having gone through this yourself, you can be like, look, how long have you been doing this? Did you say 9
for
years
clients,
or something?
3 years.
Yeah, 3
for
years.
myself,
Okay.
6, but for clients, 3. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been in this space for a long time. And that also creates an opportunity for you to relate to them and for you to say, look, this whole space has changed. Years ago, just having someone edit your podcast was enough for you to stand out. Now that's the baseline. The truth is, having someone edit your podcast is going to help you, but it's not ultimately going to get you what you want. It's just one piece. And I've gone through this transformation and realized that why I've learned all these skills. And that's why I'm on the sort of cutting edge of where this is all going. So if you just want to hire the person to do the thing that worked 5 years ago, go ahead. Like, I'm over here doing the stuff that works today.
That is a little bit scary, though, because it sounds like I'm promising all the success to them when there's so many factors involved. They're actually going to reach the podcast goal.
But let me ask you a question. If obviously there's a lot that you're not promising it. The podcast needs to be good. It needs to be whatever. But this person's going to sit somewhere and record their podcast. They're going to even if they have lots of help and whatever, they're putting a lot of time and effort to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So they're already invested, forget financially. They are already invested in doing this. And if I were to ask you, if someone hires you only to edit the podcast versus edit the podcast and do the YouTube and the optimization and all the other stuff, which one has the better chance of success? It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think that's the quote unquote promise that you're making. You can say, look, I can't guarantee that you're going to be number one on the podcast charts. There's a million variables. I don't even know what show you're going to do. I don't know. But what I can guarantee is you are going to get more out of the time and effort you're investing into this by doing this than you will if you just have an edited podcast. And the other thing, again, I'm channeling you if I were you, is I would also say, look, you don't necessarily need me to do that. I could just do the editing and you could do it yourself or find someone else to get you on YouTube and whatever. I'm just saying that anyone that's starting a podcast should be doing these things. You know, it's funny. I talk about a lot of times unrelated to podcasts, although it is comparable. I used to talk about this in terms of paid promotion and ads and stuff, right? It's amazing. Someone will put in 100 hours creating a thing, and then they won't spend $100 to get it in front of people to give it a chance to succeed. And I think that's what you want to remind people is like, they are even if it's just their time, they're heavily invested in doing this.
Yeah.
So don't you want to give it the best shot of succeeding? It's their choice, right? And that's what I mean, where you're not promising it's going to work, but I think you can, with a high degree of confidence, go, this is going to give you a much better chance than if you don't do it. And you can also point to look at all the successful shows. There's a reason they're all on YouTube. There's a reason they're doing that stuff. So I think that's you can't guarantee results, but you can guarantee that you're going to help them have the best shot at getting what they want.
That feels really comfortable.
That all makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Cool.
That's a really good reframing.
Great. Cool. So let's get into your second question. What's the next thing you want to know?
Okay. I learned early on that I don't want to outsource or have my own production company, but I did want to have other editors around me. And so I've started to run a community of podcast editors. And now I'm starting to channel jobs that come into me that aren't good for me over to them, and other jobs that I find and things like that. And I'm trying to balance the growing community with my own client work and the writing and all of these other things, and just trying to figure out how it fits into all of that.
Okay. Talk to me about balance. Balance from a time perspective, balance from a business perspective. What's the part that's tricky?
Probably time and finances.
Okay. Finances meaning it costs you money to deal with the community, let's take them one at a time. Time is, I only have X amount of time. I'm dedicating some of it to working with clients and getting clients, and that some of it to running this community and growing the community. It's a paid community or free community?
It's paid. Right now, it's awkwardly connected to the newsletter, which is where it all started. I think I have to separate the two out, but that feels so incredibly clunky and like Frontierland. I don't even know how to do any of that. I know membership places. I've been like talking to different folks that have online platforms and things like that. But I don't know about separating it out because everything right now is central and it's on the newsletter and that's how people pay to be in the space.
How many people are in the...
It's all connected
roughly
to the newsletter. So the newsletter is like 600
So
something
it's a
people.
paid newsletter that gets you access to the community or no?
There's a free and a paid. So the paid part is about 39 people.
Okay. But that's the community is only for paid people. It's for anyone who subscribes to the free newsletter.
It's mostly the people that are in the paid part or have paid for the newsletter. But then there's some folks that have done some of our online events that I've let come in. There could be a more lively community. So it's not as clear a boundary as it probably needs to be.
Okay. And the community lives where? Is it like a Facebook group or is it a Slack or Circle? Like what is it? Where is it?
It's a Google listserv and then the newsletter. So those are the two touch points.
So it's not, so when you say community, this is what I'm trying to clarify. Is it more that it's access to resources or job opportunities as opposed to some sort of message board where they're talking to each other or...
That's a really good question. Also, for the first year, we were doing YouTube lives with each other where different editors would join me every 2 weeks and we would talk to each other about the challenges we were having. So YouTube was also a space where we were talking to each other. There hasn't really been a central place for us to talk to each other except for the Google listserv, which is emails. It's clunky. Yeah.
I like it. It's classic.
It's effective, but people get emails.
But it works.
Pay attention to emails.
So they are connecting to each other. They're just doing it through the listserv.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a couple things. The first thing I would do is I would take a step back and think about what you want this quote unquote community to be. And what I would do is I would just as a hypothetical, wipe the slate clean, pretend whatever you have now doesn't even exist. And if you were starting from scratch, number one, would you even bother?
Yes, I would.
Number two. Okay. So number two, assuming you would, what would it be? What would you want it to be? Would you want it to be paid or free? What would be the purpose, the goal of it for you and for them? A clear sort of goal. So that's where I would start with that exercise. Okay, what if I was starting from scratch? What do I want this to be? Who is it for? How much time do I want to commit to this? What am I trying to get out of it? All of that kind of stuff. In the process of doing that, you may even think through, is this a community? Is this access to resources? Even if this is connection or YouTube thing, the words can get tricky. So what actually do I want this to be? And what role is this filling? Along the lines of community, just a couple of sort of general concepts to put in your head, right? Defining sort of in general what a community is and its purpose. So typically, community is not about you, about connecting your audience to each other. So you might be leading it. So the first question is, do I want to create a space where I can attract these people and really it's about them connecting with each other? Typically, they have a shared goal that they're helping each other accomplish. Two books that I'd highly recommend you read. One is the book Tribes by Seth Godin. And one of the key concepts in Tribes is this idea that communities already exist. They're just waiting for someone to say, hey, we're gathering over here. And that it's not about the sort of leader or the person. All your job is to do is to create the space for them to connect with each other. And there's a great quote in there where he says, the Beatles didn't invent teenagers. They just offered to lead them. Right? So whatever your community is, you want to think about that it already exists. They just need a place to gather. And the other book is a book called Grow Together, which is all about communities and how they grow and all that stuff. So both those books I highly recommend. Once you've gone through and figured out, okay, this is what, if I was starting from scratch, this is what I would want the community to be. This is how it would work. I think you then want to think about its relationship to your other work, your client work, your services, whatever. And if there even is a relationship or if these are really two separate projects.
I can actually answer that one right now.
Okay.
Because
go ahead.
I started it because I was working remotely for the first time and I wanted more editors around me to just share what we were going through in our isolated workspace. And what came out of it is a lot of folks would go through either feast or famine with the amount of clients and the amount of work that they had. So I figured if we kept the jobs within the group that we could help each other even things out. So nobody going through being overworked or underworked.
Okay. Why? In theory, if it's going to be a paid community, why? There's nothing wrong with it, by the way.
Time to do all of the things to organize and to do all of the things to keep it going.
Okay. And does it take a lot of time for you to do that? Again, this is where thinking through the idea that the community is its own thing.
Right. Yeah.
So thinking about how much and how active you need to be in it. And are there other members, and the Grow Together book talks about this a lot, that one of the things, I don't remember exactly how they frame it, but it's roughly like this, I think, that one of their concepts is the job of the leader or the founder of the community is to basically create new leaders in the community. So that ultimately you might launch the community, but you've identified people within it that essentially run it. Or run different elements of it, which save some of your time. So I'm sure when you think about it, and again, this is where you really have to start from scratch and think through what is this community and what is the purpose of it. If it's really just about sharing job leads and stuff, is that the best way to do it? Maybe not. Like, you need to figure out and even talk to community members now and say, guys, like, what should this be? Like, what's most valuable? What do we want? Like, that idea that it's not just yours, that you guys are collectively, what can we collectively do that will be the most beneficial to all of us? The other thing I would say, and this is a little bit different because your community audience is different than your clients. So it is two different things. But if it was aligned, there's two ways to think about it in your business. So is the community vertically aligned or horizontally aligned to your other services? And what I mean by that is, and again, these are two different things. So I don't think I'm going to share this, but I don't know that it quite aligns with you. If your community was like business podcasters, this would absolutely align, right? Which, by the way, is also worth thinking about. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, would you be better served by having a community of 100 business podcasters than 100 podcast editors? That's something to think about, right?
Yeah.
If, let's say you did have a community for business podcasters who are ultimately your clients, right? Vertically aligned means the community is an entry place for business podcasters to come in, connect with others, learn from them, whatever. And then a step up from that is they can get more help by actually hiring you, right? Horizontally aligned. So basically vertically aligned means they join the community to get help doing X. They hire you to get more help doing X. Horizontally aligned means the community helps them do X, you help them do Y. It's more like a menu. So one, it's a ladder. Join the community for X amount a month. You want more hands-on help from me, you hire me, whatever. Yep. The other way, this is not what it would be, but I'm just using this as an example. You join the community to learn tips of how to edit your podcast. You hire me to help you put your podcast on YouTube. So related, but different items, the ladder. Gotcha. So again, it doesn't really apply if your community is podcast editors because that's different. But when you're starting from scratch and brainstorming, I do think it's worth thinking, if you had a community that was successful, is it more valuable to you to have a community of potential clients or a community of other people who, I don't want to say competitors, but other people who are doing what you do?
Yeah. Oh, I want both. I'd like to do both.
Okay. So
that's a lot.
Do both, but it just takes time. But again, I would start with talking to the people in your existing community and go, what is really the most valuable thing we're doing here? Because you might find that there's another version of it that's less time consuming, that's less hard, that provides the same value. You might find that there's leaders in that community that can do the heavy lifting so you don't have to invest all that time. That's where I would start.
Gotcha.
Because right now, I think it's tough to figure out the balance if you haven't exactly figured out. It's so easy where like things start and they kind of evolve into this thing. You were starting from scratch today, you probably would do it a little differently. So that's something to think about.
Yep.
Cool. So let's get to your third question. What is the third thing you want to know?
Really, so many of these are a duality.
That's okay.
I love podcast editing and writing, and I do both podcasting space, but people get confused that I do both. They want to say, oh, you're this, or this sounds so similar to the first question. How do I shape my messaging so that they don't get confused? I don't want to hide any of this.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. When you say people, you mean potential clients? Do you mean other people in the industry don't know what to refer you for? Do you mean people that are, and let's even take a step back. Where are most of your clients coming from?
Word of mouth and seeing things that I like, questions that I answer in different group spaces, like community spaces.
Okay. Do you think clients and potential clients are confused, or do you think other people are confused?
All of the above.
Okay. Why do you think potential clients are confused?
One is I don't think they necessarily know what podcast editors do. So throwing out that I do more than that. I mean, I don't actually have the writing conversation with potential clients because I'm trying to help them figure out what they need so that we can see if we're a good match.
Okay. So let me ask you, how do you right now currently describe the specific value you provide to what specific audience?
Yeah.
And there you go.
And there we go.
That's the rub.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
I go back and forth between talking about the power of the message in what people are having in their podcasts. People get confused that I'm not talking about audio. And so I'm like, okay. And then I go back to, look, I can do this and this and get more of that granular skill stuff that they might be more familiar with and say, okay, I can do this and this to your audio and help you with video if you need to. But it's really the story that gets people into the podcasts and gets them to trust the podcasters and leads them to want to, or at least curiosity on what people are selling. When we're talking about business casters, that's where the real gold is. And something
What's the
really
best
hard.
What's the best page on your site or whatever for me to send someone?
It's probably, I have a services page with my different packages because most people's first question is how much?
Okay. All right. So here's the thing. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get clear for yourself, right? On this is the value I'm offering to these specific people. Right. So that is what you're talking about as duality. And again, you're focused on, I can do this, I can do that, I can do whatever. You know, your website right now doesn't really even, nowhere on there, I don't think, does it say that you're focused on business podcasts?
It doesn't.
Now, this is common and this gets into niche. Everybody, you're like, I can do a lot more.
Wow. Yeah.
You want to tailor your messaging to your ideal audience. I believe niche is about ideal audience, not only audience. Even if you say, I help business podcasters do X, Y, and Z, you still may get people that are not business podcasters. I get clients all the time that don't fit maybe my specific niche.
Yeah.
You can still work with them. But if you don't get specific, you want to be the perfect choice for someone, not an okay choice for everyone. Right?
Yeah.
So I think you want your messaging, assuming you are appealing to business podcasters, you want to be messaging them.
Okay.
And this is where I think you want the messaging along the lines of what we talked about before, where you're focused on the result you're helping them get. Just, I can do this tactic and that tactic and whatever. So it's a version of, this isn't the right language, but it's, I help business podcasters grow their audience, make sales, and get clients. Or I help business podcasters get the most out of the time they invest in podcasting.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about is you had said at one point, a lot of them don't even know what editing is or podcast writing is. I think it's worth thinking about, again, from an ideal perspective. Does your ideal client already know what editing is and they're looking for an editor? Do they not know what editing is? Does that matter?
It does to me because I hate doing launches. So for me, I want them to at least have had a podcast, to already have a podcast in process. I don't want somebody who wants to start a podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. But where is that messaging? Nowhere.
Yeah.
So you want to write down and think about, and I'll give you an example because I just recently launched a sales page for a group coaching program I'm doing called Inbox to Invoice. And it's to help people turn newsletter subscribers into paying clients. Number one, you'll notice how that's results focused. Not, I'm going to teach you how to grow your newsletter. I'm going to teach you how to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
It's before or after, I'm going to teach you how to turn newsletter subscribers into paying clients. And in that sales page, I have a who it's for section. And this is what it says. It says, this program isn't for everyone. It's for you if your main goal is to acquire more clients. It's if you have an existing newsletter, you publish consistently for at least 3 months. I don't want people who are like, I'm not getting into I don't have a newsletter. How do I pick a mailing platform and all that stuff. And you have an existing service you sell and want to use your newsletter to get more people to buy it. Very specifically, that's who it's for. And then I say, it's not for you if you're just starting out, if you're focused on selling a product as opposed to a service, or you're simply trying to monetize your newsletter through advertising. It doesn't mean that what I'm offering wouldn't help those people.
Right.
But I'm very clearly going, hey, if this is you, this is who this thing is for. And when you do that, now all your messaging becomes easier because you know exactly who you're talking to. And it makes you more unique. For example, with this, there's a million courses and stuff out there about how to grow a newsletter and whatever. There really isn't one that's like how to use your newsletter to get clients.
Yep.
So I think what you ultimately want is you want to be perceived as, and again, you can figure out what it is, but the person who's the expert at maximizing what business podcasters get out of their podcast, which you'll see then aligns perfectly with your messaging of not just a podcast editor, also a YouTube, all the sort of things that you do are then the ways that you do it, but you've drawn people in.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll see will happen is people are always resistant to niche because they're worried that they're going to turn down potential business and, oh my God, it's going to be too small. What's going to happen is it's going to make you seem the perfect fit for those people. And that person's going to go, oh yeah, I don't want the person that'll just edit any podcast. I want the person that specializes in that. And then when you play that out, once you have that clarity, you start to think about all your content. And now all your content, even if you're talking about the importance of story and crafting stories and editing and whatever, it's all for businesses. So if you were to write a blog post or newsletter or whatever, you're not just writing the sort of generic, here are the biggest mistakes that people make in editing. It's here are the biggest mistakes business podcasts make in edit. So the people that are going to read that and share that are now going to be your ideal audience. You don't have that ideal audience that you're creating for, then you're just randomly getting people who are whatever. That's where I would start. You need to get clear on it. And then that becomes a filter for everything, right? Then you look at your website and you go, is my website speaking to this specific thing? Is it promising this specific transformation for these specific people? The other thing I would say is I do these skill sessions, which are like 1 hour video workshops. And I did one called the Niche Definer. It's all about how to clarify your niche and message it.
Okay. You
and anyone who's listening can go to joshspector.com/sessions to get it. And you can even use, if you use code niche25, you can get it at a discount for just $25. I think you'll find that really helpful because I talk through a whole system that you can put yourself through to get clarity on who you want to serve and how to message it.
Gotcha.
Does that all make sense?
It
Questions
does.
about any of that?
No,
Cool.
I can't believe I don't have that on my website. That's it. Yeah. It's so in my head and not in the, yeah.
You're not unusual. It's so common. The stuff that's obvious to us. A couple of years ago, I'm this quote unquote newsletter expert. And I looked at my newsletter sign up page and it didn't even say that what you were signing up. It didn't even say that it was a newsletter. And I was like, and I remember I tweeted something out and I was like, maybe don't listen to any of my advice. Because apparently I didn't even tell people they were signing up for a newsletter. So I was so busy and caught up in my other messaging. So the other thing I would say is, again, once you do this, like even your headline on your website, Stephanie Fuccio, curiosity and community driven podcasting and podcast editing, no
Needs
reference to business.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And I think the key is, and this again is so common, right? All of the sort of stuff you're doing is it's the way you accomplish the thing that you're helping them accomplish. So people tend to lead with, I talk about this all the time with like coaches or courses or whatever, where they come up with some clever name. So they're like, learn my 5 P's pyramid system. And it's like, nobody is out there looking for the 5 P's pyramid system. They're looking for, how do I get more sales? How do I get more clients? How do I become a better writer? How do I whatever? And your clever system service that you offer is that. So you want your messaging to lead with the thing that people are out there saying that they want, and then go, you want this, here's how I can help you get it. I've come up with this unique system. I'm using this as a random example, but that's where you can go, you want more sales. I've come up with a system to help you get more sales. The headline should be about helping people get more sales, not learn the 5 P's pyramid. It's like people use their language. So in your example, no one's out there going, I'm looking for a curiosity and communication driven or community driven podcasting, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm doing this podcast because I want, and a big part of it is I want people to listen to it, whatever it is, like, you know what those goals are for people. And I would also even ask your clients, which I'm sure you do, but like very specifically, like, why are you doing this podcast in the first place? What do you want out of it? And then they'll tell you, you pay attention to the words they use and their language, and then you can use that in your own, now I'm quite literally speaking their language. Cool?
Yeah.
So all you got to do is sit down with a blank slate and rethink everything you're doing, and you'll be totally...
Everything.
It's all, what's funny, you're able to talk about it. It's all in there. It's just taking it out of your head and making it clear to other people.
Yeah.
Cool. Tell everybody where they can go, check out your website, your everywhere, all your creative mess. Where can they go to connect with you?
StephFuccio.com, StephFuccio is the main area. Yeah.
Cool. And for me, again, my newsletter, fortheinterested.com/subscribe. Those skill sessions, again, in addition to the niche definer, there's a bunch of them on there. I have one about getting clients. I have one about getting newsletter subscribers. You can check all those out at joshspector.com/session. If you would like some one-on-one help, go to joshspector.com/consulting. I'm on Twitter all the time at jspector. And if you would like to come on and ask me 3 questions like Stephanie did, go to joshspector.com/questions to submit them. Thank you, Stephanie. Have fun in cold Romania. Say hi to Transylvania for me. Thanks everyone for listening. I will see you or speak to you next week.